The air conditioning unit hummed a low, synthetic drone, a sterile soundtrack to the drama unfolding in the polished steel confines of the executive boardroom. This wasn't just a quarterly review. It was an inquisition, held under the merciless glare of fluorescent tubes that seemed designed to drain color and authenticity from the men seated around the massive obsidian table. On one side sat Mr. Thaddeus Sterling, impeccable, his bespoke suit tailored not merely to fit, but to announce superiority. Sterling represented the new guard, the men of metrics, algorithms, and spreadsheets. His world was digitized, sanitized, and infinitely removed from the smell of ozone, welding fumes, and rocket fuel. He was the embodiment of the academic critique, armed with a presentation deck showing every perceived flaw, every budget overrun, every single excruciating delay in the ambitious timeline for the new hyperfactory project. He spoke with the smooth, unwavering confidence of a man who has never had dirt under his fingernails. His voice, amplified slightly by the room's acoustics, was cool, calculated, a clinical instrument slicing through the messy reality of innovation. Facing him was the founder, the builder. He sat slightly slumped, his posture betraying the constant, exhausting friction of pushing physics and bureaucracy to their absolute limits. He wore the uniform of the creator, a simple, slightly rumpled black shirt, and the permanent shadow of sleepless nights etched beneath his eyes. He didn't look like a CEO, he looked like a mechanic who happened to own the factory. Sterling paused, allowing the weight of his meticulously constructed data to settle. He had just presented a slide detailing a 4-month delay on a critical assembly line component, a delay that, according to his projections, represented a catastrophic loss of nearly $2 billion in future revenue. And so, Sterling began, his gaze locking onto the founder, a smug, almost pitying look hardening his features. We arrive at the unavoidable conclusion. Your methods, sir, are archaic. Your reliance on instinct, on brute force problem solving, rather than streamlined, proven Six Sigma methodologies, is financially irresponsible. This isn't a garage startup anymore. This is a global enterprise. We need predictability. We need stability. We need to replace the romantic idea of the lone genius with disciplined, modern process management. The room was silent. The only sound was the scratching of a reporter's pen, meticulously documenting the anticipated humiliation. Sterling pressed his advantage, leaning forward over the polished table, invading the builder's space. You talk about changing the world, but your delivery schedule is failing the shareholders. We are not launching rockets made of theory, sir. We are launching capital. And your lack of managerial oversight is frankly embarrassing. He folded his hands, the gesture signaling the end of the prosecution's argument. He had laid out the case. The visionary was an incompetent manager. The creative mind had become a liability. The verdict, Sterling believed, was already sealed. The founder did not immediately react. He didn't flinch. He didn't interrupt. He simply tilted his head, his focus moving past the numbers on the screen, past the tailored suit, and settling squarely on Sterling's face. It was the look of a veteran soldier judging a fresh recruit who had just quoted a military textbook he'd never actually opened. The silence stretched. It was a dense physical vacuum, pulling the air out of the room. A full 60 seconds passed, an eternity in a high-stakes meeting where every microsecond is usually accounted for. Everyone waited for the defense. They waited for the technical rebuttal, the complex statistical counter-argument, the fiery denial. But the founder offered none of that. He reached slowly across the table, picked up a single glass of water, a fragile vessel of crystal, and took a small, deliberate sip. The sound of the glass meeting the table afterwards was disproportionately loud. Finally, the founder spoke. His voice was low, gravelly, carrying the weight of sleepless nights spent on factory floors, not in executive lounges. It wasn't defensive. It was geological. "Mr. Sterling," he began, his eyes unwavering, "you've presented impressive data, flawless PowerPoints, perfect font choices." Sterling smiled faintly, mistaking the sarcasm for praise. "You've used words like streamlined, optimization, and financial irresponsibility with admirable frequency," the founder continued, the rhythm of his voice now slow and deliberate, like the heavy beat of a massive industrial piston. "You understand the theoretical structure of risk management flawlessly." He paused again, letting the praise hang in the poisoned air. "Tell me this, Mr. Sterling." The builder leaned slightly further across the table, bringing his face closer. forcing Sterling to look beyond the numbers and into the brutal reality of the mission. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. This wasn't a question about projections. This was a question about existence. "Mr. Sterling," the founder repeated, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow commanded the entire room. "Tell me exactly how many times you have personally failed." The question hung there, a single, perfectly aimed dagger. Sterling blinked. He hesitated. He looked confused, as if this question had no bearing on the financial metrics at hand. "Sir, with all due respect, I am a consultant. My job is to analyze failure, not to experience it firsthand. My track record of delivering accurate reports is impeccable." The founder gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. A look of profound disappointment crossed his features, mixed with a chilling certainty. "I didn't ask about your reports. I asked about you." The air was thick now. The founder was not looking for academic honesty. He was looking for scar tissue. "Have you ever?" the founder continued, his voice rising, tearing through the sterile veneer of the boardroom. "Spent 48 hours straight watching a critical part melt in a furnace because the metallurgy was off by 0.001%? Silence. "Have you ever been the person standing beneath a 100-foot-tall prototype rocket, knowing that the structural calculations were borderline, and decided to light the fuse anyway, because the alternative was conceding defeat to gravity itself?" Silence. Sterling's composure, built on layers of rhetoric and polished surfaces, was starting to crack. His face flushed a dark, angry red. "Have you ever had the entire global financial press, the analysts, the competitors, and every pundit with an internet connection, all simultaneously declaring you bankrupt, insane, and obsolete, and then walked back into the factory the next morning, smelling the burned copper and diesel, to tell a team of 2,000 exhausted engineers that we start over right now, today?" The founder slammed his hand, not hard, but with authority, onto the table. The crystal glasses jumped. "No, Mr. Sterling, you haven't. You have analyzed failure from the safety of a climate-controlled office, viewing our struggles as a quarterly anomaly on a beautiful graph. The judgment was final. It was brutal. It was the authentic reality of creation confronting the hollow analysis of observation. Your criticism is polished. It is perfect. It is, in fact, absolutely useless," the founder stated, his tone flat. "Because your impeccable track record means you have never taken a risk that truly mattered. You have only risked our money, our future, and our sanity, not your own definition of self." He leaned back, the victory absolute. "You speak of financial irresponsibility. I speak of the crucible. Everything we build here, everything you criticize, was forged in the kind of failure that would have made men like you resign and update their LinkedIn profiles. We pay for failure here. We buy it dearly, because failure is the tuition fee for engineering that has never been done before." The room was stunned. The investors, initially nodding along with Sterling's compelling financial narrative, now shifted uncomfortably. They suddenly saw the difference between the man who calculates the wind and the man who sails through the hurricane. The founder finished with a crushing simplicity, echoing the profound difference between the synthetic world and the lived one. "You are obsessed with avoiding risk because your only concern is maintaining a flawless paper trail. I am obsessed with achieving the impossible, which means I must embrace risk until it breaks me, and then start again." He looked at Sterling one last time, whose flawless suit suddenly seemed thin, his voice suddenly small. "Tell me," the founder challenged, his ultimate devastating question delivered without heat, only ice-cold fact. "What does the fire taste like, Mr. Sterling? Because if you haven't tasted it, you have nothing relevant to say about the strength of the steel." Sterling was mute. He stammered, his carefully rehearsed arguments dissolving into meaningless jargon. The calculated confidence vanished, replaced by the naked terror of a man exposed for his lack of meaningful experience. He wasn't destroyed by a better spreadsheet. He was annihilated by reality. The silence that followed was heavy with the definitive sound of a career collapsing. Sterling had attempted to humiliate the man who builds the future, armed only with theory, and instead, he had been exposed as a tourist in the landscape of creation. The founder had just demonstrated the essential truth that Silicon Valley often tries to ignore. Wisdom is not found in the perfect algorithm, but in the dirty, painful, repetitive process of true failure and subsequent learning. He had dismantled the culture of plastic perfection with one single authentic question. The world watched. digitally amplified, as the man who does finally silenced the man who judges. It was a decisive win for grit over gloss, for the shop floor over the boardroom. It was a reminder that true innovation requires scars, not just spotless suits. The authentic voice born from the crucible of effort will always drown out the manufactured rhetoric of the critic. The world needs more people like this. Share if you agree.